Texas football traveled to Atlanta trying to win the SEC in their first year in the conference. Texas volleyball started their NCAA tournament journey right here on UT campus, and the UConn Huskies came to town showing the horns why they've won back-to-back natties. All of this and so much more on the fall 2024 semester finale of College Press Box. Good evening and welcome back to another edition of College Press Box. I'm Nolan Clay, co-hosting with Tyler Strempel, who will join us shortly. Before we get started, we want to remind you that College Press Box is brought to you by Cat Metro, Austin's transit system. We connect you to work, school, play, and everywhere in between. Plan your ride to this weekend's game at catmetro.org. This past Saturday, Texas wanted more than the SEC championship. They wanted revenge as they prepared to take on the only team that beat them this season, the Georgia Bulldogs. Here's how it went down. It was a beautiful day in Atlanta and the fans were ready to watch the two top dogs in the SEC duke it out for the conference title. Picking up in the first quarter with Quinn Ewers, dropping back to pass and firing one off the chest of Isaiah Bond as he watches it get picked off by Dalen Everett. Not the start Texas wanted at all. Midway through the first quarter, Quinn Ewers launching it on 3rd and 13 and finding Matthew Golden for the 50-yard catch and run, which will help set up a Burt Auburn field goal later in the drive. Later in the first, Ewers gets flushed out of the pocket, but is still able to find Matthew Golden again, who makes an incredible acrobatic catch for a 32-yard gain. Golden had 107 yards in the first quarter alone. Later in that drive, Sark pulls out the trickery on 4th and 1 with a between-the-legs direct snap to Jaden Blue for the first down. That would lead to another field goal. It's 6-3 and Texas in the second quarter as Silas Moore takes the blow and holds on to make an incredible catch. Look at the concentration right there from Golden. Burt Auburn with another field goal attempt, but this time he misses wide left and Texas leaves the drive with nothing. Ending off the first half, Carson Beck rolling out and trying to throw a Hail Mary, but he gets clobbered by Trey Moore. Texas tries to lateral it around, failing to score, but the big storyline was that the hit by Trey Moore knocked Carson Beck out of the game. So, in came Gunnar Stockton, and he put his stamp on the game immediately, right here, finding Lawson Lucky, who makes an incredible toe tap grab on the sideline. And as you can see right here, just incredible footwork from the wideout. Georgia was able to cap off the drive right here with a 10-yard run from Trevor Etienne for the first touchdown of the game, giving them a 10-6 lead. Later in the third, Burt Auburn tries to cut the lead down to 1, but right here he misses wide left again. It really just hasn't been Auburn's season. Georgia has all the momentum and it would only grow as Trevor Etienne would rumble his way into Texas territory on a 48-yard rush, sending all the Georgia fans in Atlanta into a frenzy. Texas would hold Georgia to a field goal and then tied up here on a beautiful RPO read from Quinn Ewers, who finds DeAndre Moore on the slant, who jukes his way into the end zone, knotting it up at 13 apiece. Kirby Smart sensing the momentum shifting again and then pulls out the trickery with a fake punt, catching everyone off guard. That led to another Georgia field goal, giving Georgia the lead. So now Texas needs to respond, but they don't, as Quinn Ewers gets picked off by Dalen Everett for the second time this game. However, don't leave just yet though, because as they've done all season, the Texas defense rises again right here with Jahdae Barron getting another interception, giving Texas some much needed life. Thorpe voters, are you watching? With the clock winding down the fourth, can Burt Auburn redeem himself to tie the game? Yes, he can. To overtime we go. Texas drive stalls out in OT again, and this time Burt Auburn just barely sneaks it in, giving Texas the lead 19-16. A touchdown wins it for Georgia now. So here's Gunnar Stockton on a QB draw, getting the first down, but also getting blasted by Andrew Makuba, who was initially flagged for targeting, but as we can see right here, he leads with his shoulder, so there ends up being no targeting. Stockton's helmet comes off, so Carson Beck has to come in to finish off the drive, but Trevor Etienne says, "I'll do it myself," as he powers his way into the end zone, winning the game for Georgia in overtime, 22-19. A hard-fought defensive battle from Atlanta. What a game. From TSTV Sports, we would like to thank the Moody College of Communication and the Center for Sports Communication and Media, along with our TSM advisors Frank Serpis and Jordan Knoll here on campus for sponsoring our reporters who had the privilege of traveling to Atlanta to cover the SEC Championship. Here were the collective thoughts from co-sports director Joseph Duffey, Grabiel Silva, and Justin Goosman.
Post-game here in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, the Georgia Bulldogs defeat the Texas Longhorns for the second time this season, responsible for both losses on Texas's resume. Justin Goosman, Grabiel Silva, I'm Joseph Duffey, and Justin, this game was just back and forth, a true defensive matchup.
Yeah, it absolutely was a defensive matchup, and you know, the two late picks, the Quinn interception that he threw towards the end of the fourth quarter, followed by the great play made by Jahdae Barron to get the ball right back for Texas, was really a microcosm sort of this game. The defenses really showed out throughout the entire game. Texas in the first half was able to get down the field, but not able to ever punch the ball into the end zone. That was a big story. And then for Georgia, they really couldn't do anything in the first half. Carson Beck goes down, Gunnar Stockton comes in. He kind of provided a spark, but then just the inability of the offenses giving Georgia some shorter fields really helped spark the Dogs and get them the points that they needed to overcome the adversity early in this game.
And really in that first drive of that second half, once we heard news that Carson Beck was now returning, he seemed like he really lit this team on fire and drove them down the field. Didn't score a touchdown that first drive, but you can tell that Texas's defense wasn't necessarily prepared for Stockton.
Yeah, you know, the Texas defense, they did all they could. They held Georgia to a very low amount of yards throughout the first three quarters. I think it took them up to the third quarter to finally break 100 yards total. So the Texas defense did its job. Like Goose mentioned, the offense could not punch the ball in throughout the first half. That was the big key issue for the reason why Texas found themselves in a tight game. They could have easily been up 20-plus points if they had locked the ball into the end zone. So a lot of the offensive struggles, you know, reared its ugly head back again for this Texas team.
Yeah, red zone defense for Georgia, especially the story today, again, rearing its ugly head. The rush offense, or rush attack rather, for Texas was dominant last week against the A&M Aggies. Tonight, 31 yards total as a team.
Yeah, last week, like you mentioned, Quintravion Wisner had 20-plus carries and 186 yards. This week, we only had 30 rush yards total. So the offensive line couldn't get the same push they had last week against A&M. And, you know, it was a question mark coming into the season when we knew that C.J. Baxter was going to go down. And now Quintravion Wisner's taking the heavy load. But it's been a question mark throughout the year. And like you mentioned, Joe, it reared its ugly head yet again. And it was a key point in this matchup.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I felt like the running game was really the reason the offense struggled to get it in the end zone. If they would have been able to run the ball whatsoever, the play action would have worked a little bit better. And that was really where Georgia was able to key in the second half. There was no play action. Quinn Ewers couldn't push the ball down the field like he was able to do early in that first half. And, you know, we talked about it. Grabiel just talked about it. The inability to get the run game going, and Trey Wisner, who's had such a good last couple weeks, Georgia's been able to stop that twice now. So if these two teams go head-to-head once again, that's going to be a huge storyline later on in the college football playoff. And Texas is going to need to both get healthy and get that going again if they want a chance to really compete down the stretch.
Yeah, Texas's next matchup is in 2 weeks. Again, as we stand here Saturday night, we don't know who Texas will face in that matchup in 2 weeks. But, you know, Coach Sarkisian still remained a little bit level-headed, and all the players really remained level-headed and optimistic for what is to come. Again, this new 12-team college football playoff system allows teams to really still compete even after, you know, bouncing out of what could be the top four now. So looking ahead for Texas, do they still have a great chance at winning the national championship, in your opinion, and what must they do to get back on the right track?
I absolutely think Texas still has a good chance to win a national championship. When your team is built around the defense, that enables you so much down the stretch of the season and gives you more options in how you can win games, right? We hear so often the cliche that defense wins championships, but it's true. We think about some historic NFL teams, the Legion of Boom, Seattle Seahawks, relying on that defense. Texas can rely on their defense to win games. The offense had multiple opportunities tonight where they didn't manage to punch it in, like we've already talked about. And if that gets fixed, if Texas gets in the end zone just one more time, a couple of those missed Auburn field goals connect, Texas wins this game.
Yeah, and going back to the college football playoff, right now we don't know where they're going to be. You know, if they're going to be a 5, 6, 7th seed. I think their draw for the college football playoff is going to be the biggest indicator for how far this Texas team could go. It looks like right now they're going to be hosting a home playoff game, right? And if they can avoid taking on a number 1 Oregon and a number 2 Georgia in that quarterfinal round, the path to a championship is a lot easier for Texas. So it's going to be interesting to see when the rankings come out in the morning where Texas is going to land. I think they're a championship caliber team, like Justin mentioned, with their defense. And I mean, they proved it today. They can hang around with a team like Georgia. You know, they bounced back after a loss in mid-October. So it's going to be interesting to see how this Texas team is going to, you know, try and prepare for the playoffs, as now they have a good break, some time to rest, some time to reset going forward.
All right, interesting coverage for us here in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. That will do it for us tonight here in this wonderful stadium. We do want to thank you once again for the Moody College of Communication and also the Center of Sports Communication Media for sponsoring our coverage. It has just been an amazing weekend of football here in Atlanta, Georgia. And for Justin Goosman, Grabiel Silva, I'm Joseph Duffey here at TSTV Sports. Have a good night.
Texas is not the top dog yet in the SEC. Thanks for your coverage, gentlemen. For more analysis pertaining to the college football playoff rankings and where Texas goes from here, I'll turn it over to Tyler.
Thanks, Nolan. I'm with co-sports director and executive producer of TSTV Sports' College Crossfire, Tyler Moss, who's here to fill us in on the recent college football playoff rankings. Welcome to the show, Tyler.
Thank you, Tyler. Great name as always, and obviously best time of the year to talk college football. So I'm ready to get into it.
Let's jump in. As with every college football playoff selection show, there was much speculation and debate about the seeding. It has to be asked, did the committee get it right?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk, but as always, there's not that much substance. To me, it was pretty easy. They did the best with what they were given. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at what that was and break it down. We all thought that last year's debacle would be solved with the expansion from 14 to 12 and the inclusion of automatic bids. However, 4 teams get an automatic bye, and that gave us the same problem with a different equation. Obviously, Oregon is sitting pretty with the sole undefeated record and a Big Ten championship in the trophy case. What Dan Lanning is doing out there in Eugene is looking like the blueprint for a national championship. Georgia claimed the SEC title in an overtime game against Texas. The SEC champion was always going to get the automatic bye because we all know it just means more, which left 3 conferences to look at for the committee. Arizona State, who was predicted to finish last in the Big 12, but capitalized off of the tumultuous conference that it existed. Boise State is the best group of 5 with only 1 loss to the best team in the country by 3, and Clemson, who shocked SMU late in the ACC championship to steal the automatic bid away. I think that the seeding ended up correct here, the only way it should have been. There was no way that 3-loss Clemson should have been ranked above either Boise State or Arizona State, regardless of how weak the committee views those conferences. Obviously, I mentioned SMU's having their automatic bid stolen from them, which left it in an apparent battle for the last at-large with Alabama, the most dominant program in recent college football memories on the bubble. Obviously, people are going to talk about it. This has been talked about over and over leading up to it, so I'm gonna give my 2 cents, but I'll save some of my breath for the rest of the show as well. But in no world should it have even been a debate to me. Alabama wanted or deserved a playoff spot that badly. They should have won at 6-6 Vanderbilt and at 6-6 Oklahoma, like Texas did, like Tennessee did, 2 of the SEC teams that did earn an at-large playoff spot. You can talk about strength of schedule all you want, but conference play is conference play. And outside of that, Alabama had nothing. They played 2 group of 5 teams, an FCS team, and a 5-7 Wisconsin team. Fell victim to the same thing that so many other teams early in the playoff hunt did, just losing the games that they should have won. We are not having the same discussion about BYU, who lost 2 conference games, so clearly they were out. We're not having the same debate about Miami, who lost 2 conference games. Clearly they were out. Why did Alabama get this benefit of the doubt? It shouldn't have got as much attention as it did. I'm glad we ended up where we are.
Great. So if the field is correct, how do you think this bracket plays out? Which teams have the best path to the national? Which teams have the worst?
Yeah, so I'm going to preface this segment by saying the system that we have now is flawed. We've known this. The 14 playoff is flawed. The 12-team playoff is flawed. And if we end up with 16 teams being fielded, that will also be flawed. The season is unpredictable, right? But the decisions can be baffling. And that's part of what we love about college football. I think that Georgia has the easiest path of all the teams in the bracket by a fair margin. They get that first round bye into the Sugar Bowl as the SEC winner, so a familiar environment for them. They await the winner of the in-state Friday night rivalry between Notre Dame and Indiana. Neither of those teams are that battle tested, with Notre Dame really having nobody on their schedule, and Indiana's one difficult game being a blowout loss to Ohio State. I can't see either of these teams really giving Georgia any problems, especially not traveling down to New Orleans. After that, they play whoever comes out of the Boise State, Penn State, and SMU trio, and none of them really sound like particularly difficult matchups, even as a semifinal matchup. Georgia should be able to sleepwalk to the championship, even with backup quarterback Gunnar Stockton seeing playing time. He did more with the offense than Carson Beck did in the SEC championship game, so it may be an advantage for them. The early teams won't be able to game plan effectively until Stockton has more tape later in the bracket. Next, we're going to look at the spot that everybody has been thinking about since the 12-team format was released, 5 seed. It seemed advantageous from the get-go, hosting a game against the weakest playoff team, then playing the weakest of the conference champions. That's where Texas found themselves. Losing the SEC championship wasn't ideal, but the committee stood by not punishing teams who played that extra game in their season. They ended up being ranked 3rd overall and finding themselves in that 5 seed and have themselves a home game against Clemson. An Austin-based quarterback battle, one that has happened before with Quinn Ewers and Cade Klubnik going toe-to-toe. I think Texas has a much more talented roster than Clemson. They shouldn't really have any issues handling the offense at Darrell K. Royal. Win would send them back to Atlanta, where the Sun Devils are waiting for them. Arizona State has a phenomenal running back in Cam Scadaboo, but this matchup is still more favorable than winning to get the rights to play either Georgia or Oregon. Texas defense should have no problem handling the first 2 games that they'll play. Now, for who's got the toughest, we're going to rewind and go back to where I said it's a flawed system, right? Oregon seems to have it the hardest, even after earning that top seed. They wait for the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee, 2 teams that were locked into at-large positions pretty early. Oregon barely squeaked by Ohio State early in the season thanks to Will Howard's poor decision-making. Tennessee was a Georgia loss away from being in the SEC championship. Whoever wins that is going to give Oregon a run for their money, and then they would need to face most likely Texas in the semifinals. But even Arizona State is a bit of a scary matchup. Texas's physical defense may be able to shut down Oregon on offense. Conversely, Arizona State's physical run game may slice through the Oregon's defense. Again, this being the route for the 1 seed is borderline criminal, but I mean, it was the cards that they were dealt.
Lots more outcomes with the new 12-team format. So with all of that information, take us through your bracket projections.
Yeah, so some of these I mentioned before in the earlier sections, so I'm not going to spend as much time on them, but here we go. We got a lot of games to cover with 12 teams now. Here's the blank bracket, so we'll start from the top and then head down to the bottom. As you can see from what I said earlier, I think Texas is going to have no problem handling with Clemson at home and moving on to the Peach Bowl. The Tennessee and Ohio State matchup is the most intriguing of all of the first round, but I'm very hesitantly going to pick Ohio State, even after the fiasco that happened the last time at the Shoe. I haven't talked about the Penn State and SMU matchup at all because I think it's kind of the most yawn-inducing of the first round. However, I do have this gut feeling that this will be our big upset of the playoffs, and Penn State's recent history of upper-tier mediocrity will continue. Isn't a whole lot of analysis other than them just being the team that never could out of the Big Ten, and I think that SMU is going to be playing with something to prove. I think Kevin Jennings and the Mustangs are going to head into Happy Valley and sneak out a win. Indiana and Notre Dame is going to be a great environment, but that's really all I have to say about it. I can't see Indiana getting a win in South Bend. The Fighting Irish are going to advance. They have beat up on a bunch of smaller teams this year, and while that NIU loss still haunts them, Indiana looked feeble when they finally played competition in Columbus. We're going to go back up to the top of the bracket, another matchup I discussed already. I think Texas is going to take care of business against Scadaboo and Arizona State. They have the youngest head coach in FBS football in Kenny Dillingham, and as hot as they've been recently, the inexperience may finally catch up to them. Oregon and Ohio State would shape up to be a rematch of their October matchup. I think the results is going to be the same. Give me the Ducks and lock in a Ryan Day coaching malpractice. SMU and Boise State kind of feels like a weird Twilight Zone-esque New Year's Six Bowl, but I'll take the Broncos over the Mustangs. They've got Ashton Jeanty as their own workhorse who has gotten them this far, and I think he's going to get them at least one round further. Georgia and Notre Dame I've kind of already discussed, so give me the Dogs manhandling Notre Dame. And now here is where things get a bit more interesting. I sat on this Texas and Oregon matchup for a long time, and it still feels like I'm convincing myself right now, reading this, one way or the other. The game is going to take place at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, a clear home field advantage for Texas. But is their defense going to be able to keep up with Oregon's offense? Or can the Texas offense match the defense, something they couldn't do against Georgia twice? Too many inconsistencies with that offense has led me to choose the Ducks. Again, a decision I'm still extremely uncertain about. Again, Georgia, as I've discussed also, I think that physical front seven is going to eliminate G&T in the run game for Boise State and make them way too one-dimensional, the same way it took it away from Texas. And now we're sitting at a final national championship matchup where I've speculated that Oregon and Georgia are going to meet in Atlanta. Obviously, what happens here is really murky, and all it takes is one different victory in this bracket, and we're looking at a totally different matchup here. The explosive Oregon offense behind the veteran Dylan Gabriel, and all too experienced Kirby Smart coaching his prospective third national championship in 4 years. Anything can happen, but at this point, it seems too far in the future to tell. I'm going to say a Georgia national championship may be in store. It seems like you can't count out the Bulldogs in any of these big games this season, but anybody's guess is as good as mine.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tyler. I'm going to turn it back at the desk to Nolan.
Those are very insightful takes, Tyler. Thank you very much. When we return, we'll be talking about Texas Volleyball's tournament. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to College Press Box. After back-to-back sweeps, Texas Volleyball secured a spot in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA Volleyball Tournament. Nolan is beside a special guest to talk about the recent tournament wins.
Thanks, Tyler. I'm here with Justin Goosman, rejoining the show to update us on the NCAA tournament performance. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm doing great. It was a good weekend of football and volleyball, and it's always good to be back on College Press Box talking some volleyball.
Absolutely. So let's get started. Texas Volleyball rejoins the Sweet 16 for the 19th season in a row and is attempting to win 3 consecutive national championships. What went right for the Longhorns this weekend?
Well, I mean, one of the things that went right is obviously the home court advantage. Texas gets to host the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament on most years, and that's always a big advantage. UT Arlington, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and USC all traveled to Austin, and all of them ended their season in Gregory Gym. Texas swept A&M Corpus Christi on Thursday to start it off, and the Longhorns got the momentum and confidence they needed to make it far in the tournament so far. Mariana Singletary came into this season with big shoes to fill after Asia O'Neal went pro following her 2 national championships. It's clear that she has all the confidence she needs now, and her slide is nasty as she continues to be a huge threat around the net when it comes to blocking opponents, only giving opposing offenses so much to work with. Singletary finished with 16 kills and 6 blocks against A&M Corpus Christi and USC. The corners have also gotten stronger thanks to 2 people, Jenna Wennis and Reagan Rutherford. Wennis has struggled defensively, but at 6'1", she still manages to dig it. As for the lefty, I don't know if you'd rather dig a line or cross shot from her because she manages to do it all. Rutherford finished with 14 kills over the weekend, and Jenna Wennis put up 13 of her own against USC. Speaking of USC, this could have been a tough one for Texas, but they ended up sweeping the Trojans too. The key thing here is that Texas didn't put USC in an early grave like they did against the Islanders. Texas had to battle late into sets, winning 26-24, 25-20, and 25-22. Instead of getting shaken up, however, the Longhorns fought and they played clean throughout. If they can continue that, they can end up with the three-peat when it's all said and done.
Absolutely, and Texas have had their struggles this season, but they seem to be peaking at the right time for sure. On to the next question. Texas ended the conference play with a record they weren't hoping for. Texas lost at home for the first time in over a decade, but it seems to have turned around for the most part. Who is the game changer for this team?
Well, there's a lot of people capable on this team of changing the game, but there's only one name that comes to mind when you think of completely changing Texas's vibe on the court. Madison Skinner has given us looks of playing like herself, but this weekend made you remember how fun it is to watch Skinner when she's having fun. On the net, in the back row, or serving, Skinner is always the reason Texas dominates, and she was the reason they dominated this weekend. Defenses know what Skinner is capable of, but she was able to alternate speed and swings and target different parts of the court all weekend long, putting up 15 kills against the Islanders and 23 against USC. Skinner also put up 5 blocks and put up an ace against the Trojans. Skinner is no stranger to the NCAA tournament, and her last appearance may just be her best yet.
You know, it's so good to see Maddie Skinner playing. I don't know if you saw the feature story piece on her.
Absolutely.
It was so beautiful, really good story, and it's so glad to see her playing well. What else is left for Texas, and who do they face next?
Well, there's a lot of ways the bracket could go, but Texas is just 3 wins away from a national championship game, and they're going to have to get through a pretty stout Creighton team first. Former Kentucky Wildcat and old teammate with Madison Skinner and Reagan Rutherford, Elise Gutzinger, has led the Blue Jays to an 18-0 conference season. They also swept North Dakota and Ole Miss to get to play Texas this Friday. If Texas gets through them, they'll most likely play Penn State next. After that, they could face Nebraska or Wisconsin, 2 absolute powerhouse programs with revenge in mind given how Texas has ended their seasons in recent years. The last possible outcome is a third matchup against Texas A&M if they're able to pull off a couple of upsets. A&M split the series with Texas this season 1-1, with each team winning on the road. And I know Texas fans will absolutely get up for a game like that. Texas's path is incredibly tough, arguably the toughest it's been since they started their run a couple years ago. But this is a squad that can accomplish a whole lot in the postseason, and I would not doubt a team coached by Jared Elliott and led by Madison Skinner.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Justin. Back to you, Tyler, at the desk.
Thank you both for that top-tier analysis. When we return to College Press Box, Texas basketball had its biggest home test of the 2024 season, welcoming Dan Hurley and the UConn Huskies to the Moody Center. We've got more analysis in store when College Press Box returns.
Welcome back to College Press Box. Rodney Terry entered Sunday evening's contest 7-1 in 2024, desperate to have their biggest win of the season against the UConn Huskies. Our reporters Aaron Vila and Demony Serta covered all of the action.
On Saturday, the Texas Longhorns faced Georgia in the SEC Championship game, a 2-time defending national champion. And the next day, the Texas Longhorns men's basketball team faced the same challenge against a 2-time defending national champion in the UConn Huskies and Dan Hurley. The Longhorns would get another crack at the Huskies after last year's 81-71 loss in New York.
This game pitted Rodney Terry against Dan Hurley. 2 very different coaches systematically, but also 2 very successful coaches in the last couple of years. It was a tale of 2 halves for the Texas Longhorns, as in the first half they were held to a total of just 1 assist by UConn. Seemingly nothing was going right for the Horns, as this was one of the most embarrassing halves of basketball ever played in the Moody. In the second half, however, Rodney Terry and his squad made the necessary adjustments to remain competitive throughout the rest of the match with UConn. The defense was better. They clogged UConn's passing lanes and made it harder for them to get the open looks that they were getting in the first half. And they got a pretty strong showing from freshman phenom Trey Johnson, who had 24 points, and Kansas State transfer Arthur Kulima, who put in 20. These 2 players fueled the comeback and were pretty much the only reason why UConn didn't blow Texas out of the water following the first half. With this being said, the comeback effort was to no avail as the UConn Huskies stood strong and ended up beating the Longhorns 76-65.
While the comeback effort ultimately fell short for the Texas Longhorns, they stayed in a gutsy and competitive second half with the UConn Huskies fueled by Trey Johnson and Arthur Kulima. They both had strong performances, and UConn is the golden standard of college basketball at this point. 2-time defending national champions. Dan Hurley, he's built an amazing program over there. As far as the 21st century goes, they're the most competitive program. They're up there with Duke, Carolina, Kansas, and they're just the golden standard.
You know, you're going to learn lessons throughout the course of your season, early in our journey. You know, you can't give 20 minutes away, and you know, we'll learn from this and we'll be better for it moving forward.
If there's one thing that Rodney Terry and players like Arthur Kaluma and Trey Johnson emphasize, is that this is not a bad loss to have this early in the season. They can learn from it just like they did last year and get better throughout the course of the season. The Longhorns will be facing the NMSU Aggies, a foe from the land of enchantment, New Mexico, back here on the 12th, and we'll be here. I'm Aaron Vella, TSTV Sports. Have a good night.
Texas football finally has its path to the national championship as it was announced earlier today. Meanwhile, Texas men's basketball took on two-time defending national champions, the UConn Huskies.
You know, you're going to learn lessons throughout the course of your season, early in our journey. You know, you can't give 20 minutes away, and you know, we'll learn from this and we'll be better for it moving forward.
Texas shot 42% from the field.
Definitely rather lose early and learn from what you could have done, and so you're not making the same mistakes when you get the SEC play. But I think we can learn a lot from it, especially just coming out and playing harder in the first. So I feel like we come out and play harder in the first half on the defense, and I feel like it's a whole different story.
Despite the loss, this matchup brings out a lot of positives for this Texas team.
It's a great game for us. Last year we got better through a loss with those guys, and unfortunately we have to try to get better again this year. A lot of respect for their program and how they play and the pressure they put on you. And again, you know, we got, I thought, maybe their best game of the year.
Texas falls short to UConn 76-65. They'll look to turn the page over on Thursday as they take on the Aggies, not Texas A&M Aggies, the New Mexico State Aggies, right here in Austin. TSTV Sports, Debony Serta.
Texas just came up a little bit short, but hopefully this could be used as a way to improve. Thanks, Deb and Aram. For more, let's go back to Tyler.
Thanks again, Nolan. I'm with Giorgy Ruiz to break down the game with us. Welcome back to the show, Giorgy.
Hi, thank you. It's great to be having me and great to talk about some basketball.
Yeah, so this was an anticipated matchup against the back-to-back national champions. How did UConn perform on the road this week?
Well, this was a big matchup for the Texas Longhorns and UConn, but, you know, Texas Longhorns had some inconsistencies from the start, and, you know, UConn just capitalized on that. Longhorns' offensive drive was hindered by shots that were just not made, and UConn's performance made an early lead with sophomore guard Solo Ball with 3 points to give the Huskies a 9-2 lead, and capitalizing on an offensive to an 18-point deficit at the end of the first half. But all eyes were on Alex Caravan, who suffered a concussion during UConn's final game in the Maui Invitational. His return performance at Moody led the Huskies to victory, his first career double-double, and he had 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and made for 21 points. And he also achieved his 1,000th career point. His defensive work was good too, with 2 blocks and a steal. You know, another notable contender or person to talk about was Solo Ball, who also hit his career high with 16 points, and another double-digit scorer was fifth-year Hassan Diarra with 11 points, also reaching his career high. You know, this offensive was consistent from the start and made some early leads and just ran all over that Texas defense, and they did really, really good, especially. But although the Longhorns made a 7-0 run in the last minutes, leading to a single-digit gap, the Huskies came out of Austin with a win, and, you know, definitely proved why they are back-to-back champions, despite them being very low in the polls right now.
Yes, low in the polls after those 3 straight losses. Like you said, Texas was not playing to their full potential on Sunday night. How do you think their defense allowed so many points so early in the game?
Well, like you said, Texas definitely wasn't playing to their potential Sunday night, and it showed on the defensive end, especially in the paint. They gave up over 36 points down low, which was the first for them this season without Jason Kent, who has been a big presence off the bench, and they really struggled to compete on the boards, and that just let UConn dominate inside. You know, but Arthur Kaluma did his part and led the teams in rebounds, but no one else stepped to the glass or defensively, and it just wasn't about rebounds either. The guard and wing rotations weren't locking down on their assignments. UConn exploited on these gaps, like we've been saying, and once they started winning in the paint, Texas just couldn't keep up. And offensively, it was mostly Kaluma and freshman star Trey Johnson carrying the load, and outside of them, the scoring was just not there, and it's hard to win these games when the defense is breaking down and you're just not scoring beyond 2 players, and you have to tighten up on both ends of the court to get moving, especially with teams that are, you know, just so skilled in the paint and just know what they're doing. With some crucial letdowns, the Texas also gave up many free throws, something that should be textbook and shouldn't be a struggle for a big team like Texas. The team is great, and they have a lot of star transfers, but they just weren't in a rhythm this past Sunday and need to start hitting their weak spots in practice.
We got to be grateful that it's early in the season and not late or in a championship when you have this kind of performance. But with Arthur Kaluma and the star freshman leading the charge for Texas men's basketball, what specific traits make them effective leaders on the court, particularly in high-stakes matchups like this one against UConn?
Well, Arthur Kaluma and the freshman guard really showed why they're kind of leading this team, especially in a tough matchup like this one. And then, however, Kaluma was all over the place, leading by example in his rebound and efficient scoring, and he dropped a season-high 20 points on a 6 of 11 shooting, which included some clutch threes and some free throws. And defensively, he stepped up with a huge block in the first half and brought a consistent presence. One of Kaluma's best traits is how he keeps the team grounded in these heavy moments. Even when Texas put him in tough spots with the late shot clock, isolation plays, or double teams inside, he stayed composed and made the best of those situations. His ability to do the dirty work, grabbing boards, taking smart shots, and defending effectively is what makes him such a crucial piece. And there's a little bit of an argument thinking that Trey Johnson was an MVP, but I think Kaluma proved an MVP. But as for Johnson, he's proving to be skilled beyond his years. After a slow first half, he turned it around in the second, exploiting matchups against smaller defenders, scoring 18 points in the second half, and tying his season high with 4 assists and 24 points. He showed his versatility and determination. Like I said, he had 24 points in this game with 4 assists and 3 steals, and his ability to elevate in high pressure moments and distribute the ball despite limited help speaks volumes about his leadership potential. Together these two account for most of the Texas offense and showing that they can be counted in these tough situations. But for Texas to succeed, they would need more contributions from the rest of the rotation, because as good as Arthur Kaluma and Trey Johnson are, they can't carry the load alone.
Thank you very much for that analysis, and best of luck to Terry's squad for the rest of the season.
Thank you, Tyler and Giorgy. When College Press Box return, we'll take a look at the past week in Longhorn sports and look forward to what's to come. Stick around with us on College Press Box. Welcome back to College Press Box. Let's take a look at this past week in Longhorn sports. On Thursday, Texas women's basketball suffered their first defeat of the season, losing to Notre Dame in overtime. However, the Horns were able to bounce back on Sunday, beating James Madison on the road 93-62. Madison Booker led the way for the Horns, scoring 21 points on an extremely efficient 10 for 13 shooting night. Texas looks to start up another winning streak as they take on the Southern Jaguars on Wednesday at the Moody Center.
Texas defensive end Colin Simmons was named a finalist for the Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year award, given to the most outstanding freshman in college football. On the year, Simmons has 7 sacks, 11.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and 36 total tackles. Simmons joins Alabama wide receiver Ryan Williams, Minnesota safety Coy Parrish, Ohio State wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, and South Carolina defensive end Dylan Stewart as finalists. The winner of the award will be revealed December 26th.
The future is bright for Texas football as Sark and the rest of the Texas coaching staff were able to bring home the #1 ranked 2025 recruiting class. The Longhorns were able to sign 24 players in the early signing period, with 10 of them being top 100 ranked recruits. Texas added the cherry on top when they shocked the recruiting community, securing the signature of D-line recruit Justice Terry, who's from the state of Georgia. The next national signing day is on February 5th. Now let's take a look at this week in Longhorn sports. On Wednesday, women's basketball plays Southern University at home. That's at 7 p.m. on SEC Network Plus. Thursday, men's basketball Men's basketball plays at home against New Mexico State at 7 p.m., also on SEC Network Plus. Friday, women's volleyball plays in the Sweet 16 against Creighton at 12 p.m. That is on SEC Network Plus as well. Now, and then on Sunday, we have a doubleheader with women's basketball and men's basketball playing. Women's basketball goes to Richmond at 12 p.m. on Sunday on ESPN Plus. Men's basketball is going to go against Arkansas Pine Bluff here at Moody Center. That will be at 2 p.m. on SEC Network Plus. And on Thursday, if women's volleyball is able to defeat Creighton, they will play the winner of Penn State Marquette at 7:30 on ESPN.
And that will conclude this week's edition of College Press Box. Please make sure to like and share this video if you're watching on YouTube. And also follow our TSTV sports accounts on our Instagram, X, and YouTube. Thank you to everyone in Master Control, our analysts, our executive producer, Joseph Duffey, and our many members who have made this show flow smoothly with their weekly episodes. I'm Tyler Strempel. He's Nolan Clay. Thank you for watching. Have a good night, and see you next semester.